You've heard this one, right? Coca Cola invented Santa's red suit. The story goes, before the 1930s, Santa was all over the place. Green robes, weird cloaks, totally inconsistent. And then Coca Cola slapped him on a billboard in bright Coke red, and bam, the modern Santa was born. It's a brilliant piece of brand mythology. There's just one problem. It isn't true. In this episode, we're going to track Santas before Coca Cola, meet the illustrator who really standardised his look, and see what Coke actually did and didn't change. And by the end, you'll be able to answer once and for all, did Coca Cola invent modern Santa, or just hijack him? To see what Coke did, we need to see what was already there. Long before the red suit and the polar bears, you had St. Nicholas, a Christian bishop from what's now Turkey, associated with generosity and gifts for children. His feast day was December the 6th, not the 25th. In the Netherlands, that became Santa Claus, bishop's robes, mitre, staff, arriving by boat, giving presents to kids. Dutch settlers take that to America, and Santa Claus slowly becomes Santa Claus. In Britain, you've got Father Christmas, not really a toy-delivering guy, more a personification of midwinter feasting and good cheer. He's often drawn in green or brown, tied to nature and plenty rather than chimneys and reindeer. So even before we get to Santa, you've already got red bishop's robes in some places, green-cloaked winter spirits in others, and a whole mix of local customs. No single suit colour, no single body shape, no single brand. The next big step is a poem. In 1823, an anonymous poem appears that later becomes known as "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." This is where we get a huge chunk of the modern checklist. Santa arrives on Christmas Eve, he travels by reindeer and sleigh, he comes down the chimney, he's jolly, plump, and definitely partial to the snacks you leave out. The poem doesn't fix a colour for the suit, but it does something just as important. It turns the vague, half-mythic gift-bringer into a specific character with habits and a timetable. From that point on, illustrators and advertisers have a clear brief. Draw this jolly overnight visiting toy-delivering man. And one illustrator in particular takes that prompt and runs with it. Enter Thomas Nast, a German-American political cartoonist working for Harper's Weekly in the late 1800s. Starting in the 1860s, Nast draws Santa Claus again and again in Christmas issues. Over time, he quietly nails down a lot of what we now take for granted. Santa is a round-bearded older man. He lives at the North Pole. He has a workshop and keeps lists of children. He arrives by chimney carrying a sack of toys. In Nast's work, Santa's outfit shifts, sometimes brownish, sometimes more colourful. But red is already one of the colours in play, decades before Coca-Cola touches him. The important thing is reach. Harper's Weekly is a mass circulation magazine in a growing United States. For millions of readers, this is what Santa looks like. By the 19th century, long before Coke advertises a single Christmas, you already have a plump jolly Santa, often in red, with reindeer, chimney, sack, North Pole, lists, the whole package. In other words, the basic template of modern Santa exists before Coke even enters the picture. Now we jump to the 1930s. Coca-Cola has a marketing problem. People see it as a summer drink. They want to convince customers that Coke is also a winter refreshment, something you can have at Christmas. So in 1931, they hire illustrator Haddon Sundblom to create a Santa for their holiday campaigns. Sundblom doesn't invent a brand new character. He draws on the night before Christmas Santa, Nast's existing imagery, and real-life models, including a retired salesman and later himself in the mirror. His Coca Cola Santa is big, warm, grandfatherly, with a full white beard and rosy cheeks, wearing a bright red suit with white fur trim, black belt, black boots, shown in relaxed, playful scenes, reading kids' letters, raiding the fridge, sharing a Coke. What's new isn't Santas in red, that existed. What's new is how consistent, polished and widely distributed this version is. Coca-Cola uses Sundblom Santa every Christmas, across magazines, billboards, shop displays, and later in countries all over the world. The result? One very specific Santa becomes the Santa in people's heads. So of course it starts to feel like Coke invented him, even though they're really building on top of an existing design. Let's tackle the claim directly. Santa only wears red because of Coca Cola's branding. Historically, red was already associated with St. Nicholas's bishop's robes. Father Christmas appears in red as well as green in 19th century art. Nast and other illustrators show Santa in red outfits long before the 1930s. So no, Coke doesn't sit down in 1931 and say, let's change Santa from green to red. Red was already in the palette. What Coca-Cola does is take that red, match it to their brand colour, and repeat it so relentlessly that alternative Santas in green, brown, blue get pushed to the margins. So, did Coke massively popularise one version of a red-suited Santa in the 20th century? Yes. Did Coke invent Red Santa from scratch? No. The record shows he's older than their campaign. So why do so many people still believe Coca-Cola invented Santa's look? First, it's a really satisfying story about corporate power, one company reshaping Christmas. Second, Coca-Cola leans into the association. Vintage posters, Christmas trucks, nostalgia-heavy ads. They don't usually claim they invented Santa, but they absolutely encourage us to link Santa and Coke in our heads. Third, most of us only really remember Santa from the mid-20th century onwards. By then, the Coca-Cola style has already saturated shop windows, magazines and TV. If the Santa your grandparents saw, your parents saw and you grew up with all look roughly like Sundblom's, it's easy to assume that's where he started. But zoom out and the timeline becomes clear. Saint, poem, Nast, then Coke. So did Coca-Cola invent Santa Claus's red suit? Myth. Before Coke, Santa was a strange green goblin and the red suit is just a 1930s marketing trick. The reality? Santa evolves from St. Nicholas, Santa Claus and Father Christmas. The Night Before Christmas poem fixes his personality and routine. Thomas Nast and other 19th century artists give him a recognisable look, often in red, decades before Coke. Coca-Cola then standardises and globalises that version. They don't conjure it out of nowhere. So next time someone tells you, you know Santa was invented by a soft drink company, right? You'll know that's great advertising, not good history. This is part 1 of our Christmas mini-series. In part 2, we're asking whether Jesus was really born on December the 25th. In part 3, we dive into Krampus, the so-called demonic enforcer of Christmas. And in part 4, we tackle the claim that the Victorians invented Christmas itself. If you learned something new, hit like, subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the series. And tell me in the comments, did you grow up believing Coca-Cola invented Santa? I'm Tam, this is Fact or Fiction Foundry, and I'll see you in part 2.